It's said you can tell how civilized a society is by entering its prisons. Well, enter the prisons of Pakistan and you'll find women imprisoned on charges of adultery. Women imprisoned because they said they were raped and couldn't prove it. Women imprisoned and they don't know why. A civilized society? By Western standards, Pakistani women are some of the most oppressed women on earth. And yet, incredibly, a woman has come to power there.
That's true. The woman is Benazir Bhutto, and even she, as strong as she is, can't change the laws. Some women there have suffered in extraordinary ways, and they suffer still. Tom Jarriel ventured to the Asian nation of Pakistan, with Iran to the west and India to the east. And here is how it looked to Tom.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
They call Pakistan the land of the pure. It's a nation founded on religion, a culture dominated by Islamic beliefs. 5 times a day, the faithful pray to Allah as the call of the muezzin goes out. In the midst of this religious fervor, there are 50 million women who live as second-class citizens. Misery is their social mandate. They face death by stoning.
It was a horrible experience. They told me I was going to be stoned to death in public.
Prison without trial, rape in jail, and torture by members of their own family.
I was strangled. I still have marks on my neck from that. I was burned by an iron. That I can show you. I have other marks on my body. I cannot show you.
They are bartered like property.
The masses, the rural women, are the ones who've been brought up to be considered as, say, a piece of furniture or a chair or a table to be sort of disposed of and to be utilized and to be used as time comes.
The life of the Pakistani woman is among the most oppressive in the world. This is the story of their struggle.
Earlier, there was no awareness. I mean, women took whatever came in their stride, and they felt that was their fate. Now they're beginning to say it's unfair. They're beginning to say we won't take it anymore.
But change comes slowly in this ancient land. Women's rights here have been frozen in time. Case in point, Machawali, a dusty village far from the crowded cities of Pakistan. Our arrival triggered an immediate confrontation. The village elder did not want us to film the women we'd come to interview, for good reason. What happened here in the tiny rural village of Machawali is just one example of how Pakistani women are at the mercy of long-standing cultural traditions. Those traditions demand that young daughters here be given in arranged marriages to men only of this village. But when one mother defied that tradition, an angry mob of local men showed up at her door.
The men came to my house when my husband was not here, and I told them, no, my husband is not home, and please wait till my husband comes home.
The villagers had come to demand that 16-year-old Maqsuda marry an older man in Machawali, a widower. She refused. Maqsuda and her sister were beaten and dragged screaming across this courtyard to a nearby house. There were 18 men.
They took me away from here, and they shamed me.
How many were there? How many attacked you?
3. There were 3.
3. The girl's mother reported the rape to police. Days passed. Before they began to investigate, a bizarre compromise was reached. The people of the village have now, the men, have said they are sorry. Are apologies enough?
They came to us on their knees asking for forgiveness. We had no choice but to settle this affair.
We are surrounded by all of them. This has to be enough.
In the end, tradition prevailed over gang rape. Here in rural Pakistan, it seems, tribal justice is the rule. Although Maqsuda did escape the forced marriage, she sees her attackers every day. For her, there is no way out of the village of Machawali.
For us, there is a Machawali per day, and there is no time for us to sit back.
Asma Jahangir is a woman's rights attorney, an occupation almost unheard of in a place like Pakistan. Her law firm has become the headquarters for those fighting against a system she says abuses women at every turn.
In Pakistan, if a woman is raped, she is not protected by law. In fact, the law puts her to the risk of being arrested herself.
Pakistani law requires the improbable. 4 Muslim men must testify as eyewitnesses in order for a woman to prove rape. Iftikhar Gilani is the Minister of Law in Pakistan. He admits many women are afraid to report rape because it can backfire into an adultery charge.
There have been cases where a woman was raped, and the man who is alleged to have raped her is exonerated, is acquitted. But now she is convicted, she is sentenced. That, oh, you, because you said you were raped, so you've committed an offense.
So the woman is convicted of adultery because she reports a rape?
Yeah.
That seems incredible.
Yes, it is incredible. It's illogical, it's unreasonable, it's inhuman.
Pakistan today has inherited a number of laws that discriminate against women, the aftermath of a decade of martial law. It was 1977 when General Zia-ul-Haq overthrew the democratic government of President Ali Bhutto. Pakistan would now be ruled by a military dictatorship. Life under General Zia was rigid and unforgiving. Public floggings were meted out to those who spoke out against Zia's regime. Enemies of the government were hanged, including former President Bhutto. His daughter Benazir was locked up in this cell.
I remember the almost hopelessness of the situation then. And it wasn't that long ago.
Benazir was released after 3 years and fled to London. In Pakistan, the turmoil continued. General Zia unleashed a radical fundamentalist plan. Pakistan would return to a strict interpretation of Islamic law. The Zina Ordinance was established, making adultery and fornication a crime against the state. If convicted, the punishment was barbaric: death by stoning. Thousands of women were arrested on Zina charges. Many remain in prison today. The Zina Ordinance is still the law in Pakistan.
The fundamentalists tried very hard to stop our voices.
Asma was at the forefront of the fight to repeal Zia's laws, organizing protest marches for women's rights, enraging the establishment.
There were about 500 policemen who wouldn't let us pass through. They really beat us up pretty badly. We were tear-gassed. Some of us were taken to jail. We stayed in jail. Later on, every mosque throughout the country said that these women are promiscuous women. They should be deported from Pakistan. Their marriages are dissolved in the eyes of God.
Asma was condemned to death by the National Assembly for her outspoken defiance.
And it was in the national TV, and I was sitting at home watching television, and suddenly they say, one of women activists has been condemned to death. And I said, oh, poor dear, who is she? And then later on learned it was myself.
Courageously, she stood up to the death sentence.
We had come to a stage where it didn't matter to us whether they put us to death, but we had to go on saying that this is unfair, this will not do, and you cannot condemn women to death through your laws, whether they are made in the name of Islamization or not.
By 1985, widespread rioting was breaking out against Zia's dictatorial rule. A year later, he lifted martial law, and Benazir Bhutto returned home, capitalizing on the wild adoration she receives as the daughter of the martyred Prime Minister. She drew massive support in her campaign to topple her old enemy, General Zia. A political showdown was inevitable. But Zia did live to see the outcome. He died when his plane was sabotaged. His death opened the door to the first free elections in 11 years in Pakistan. Women turned out in large numbers to vote. On December 2nd, 1988, Benazir Bhutto was sworn in as Prime Minister, the first woman to head an Islamic nation in modern times. Hope soared among many Pakistani women. Surely now Zia's discriminatory laws would be overturned.
We do not wish to retain any law which is discriminatory. It's just that we have a lot of problems that arise out of transition from a dictatorship to a democracy.
Bhutto's hands are essentially tied. Any law passed under martial law can only be overturned by a 2/3 vote of the National Assembly. And Bhutto doesn't have the votes.
I feel that just because we have a female prime minister does not really mean that it's going to be plain sailing for women. Like, have you noticed, she's a Western educated lady, and I don't think that she ever cared very much putting the veil on her head. And she's doing that. Even in this, she can't do exactly as she pleases. So repealing a law is a far cry.
At your political rallies, the men and the women were separate, segregated, two different groups. Do you think that's the way the women would like to have it?
Yes, they feel more safe.
Really?
They feel more safe. But I used to be very much against segregation earlier on. But now I'm not so sure. And the reason is that in a closed society, women are apprehensive to go out. It's a big risk they take. And they go against tradition.
Even now, with a female prime minister in power, half the population of Pakistan is virtually invisible. The local bazaar is a sea of faces, almost all of them men. Women rarely venture outside, and when they do, they almost always wear the burqa, a veil that covers them from head to foot.
It's more of a cultural thing in the way we've been brought up. If I go to my hometown, I'll have my head covered and I'll have my face covered, and I will not be able to, like if you were to come to my village, I'm sure you won't see me around.
Shaheen Sardar Ali is about as modern and progressive as a woman can be in Pakistan. She's the only female law professor in the entire country. Yet Shaheen's marriage to her first cousin was arranged by her grandfather when she was 4 years old. Even Prime Minister Bhutto, educated at Radcliffe in Oxford, went along with the Pakistani custom of arranged marriages, agreeing to marry a man she had known only 7 days. In rural Pakistan, poor women are routinely sold into marriage or bargained away. In one village, a toothless old man showed up to collect on a debt. The payment was to be an 8-year-old bride. Benazir Bhutto was brought in to settle the dispute.
And the father had tears in his eyes, and he said, how can I give my daughter? And I could understand the horror even of that girl. And I ruled the family had a right to now settle for monetary compensation rather than give the girl. It may have been splitting hairs, and the toothless old man was mad, but I just thought that it would be so unfair. I didn't realize how much old traditions still held sway.
Consider the plight of this girl, forced by her parents to marry at age 13. She had never seen the man who would become her husband until the wedding. From the beginning, he tortured her.
He would tie you up, your arms over your head out in the sunshine, and chain you in your room at night?
Whatever violence was possible for this man to do to me, he would do. And finally he told me if I didn't get well in 2 days because of what he'd done to me, he would shoot me. At that point, I left my house, my husband's house.
Today, frail and sick, Meru lives here in this government shelter. At age 16, her chances for a normal life are dismal.
My family has been of no help to me. They've threatened me, and if they had a chance, they would try and kill me. I'm very tired of running away. The only path I see in front of me is suicide. I can spend the rest of my life in this shelter, or I can go mad.
For those who have fled from abusive homes, there is little anger, only resignation. These women now live as social outcasts.
It's that women accept it as their fate because they do not see an alternative. Where would they go? Where would they live? Who would feed them?
The government has set up shelters for women who flee from abusive marriages. But Pakistani society has little tolerance for women who go public with family problems. One family convinced a young bride to return home after she sought protection at this shelter. But when she got there, the family informed her she had disgraced them. The father hacked her to death with an axe.
How often does this happen? Is it frequent?
Well, let's say it happens daily. In Pakistan, if his female relative is promiscuous or suspected to be promiscuous.
Even the appearance of sexual impropriety is still against the law in Pakistan. Men and women are rarely seen in public together. And if they are stopped and not related, it's a crime under the Zina Ordinance.
What are the possible implications if you and I are in an automobile and I touch you on the shoulder? What can happen?
Well, anybody could stop us and report us to the police, and we could be arrested for attempt to zina.
Just a touch between a man and a woman, they must prove that they're married in order to not be arrested?
Yeah, absolutely. For a woman, she has to go through a medical examination. And for an unmarried woman, if she's found to be not a virgin, she's had it. the punishment can be for 4 to 10 years.
For a female to land herself up in prison is terrible. And I don't think that a woman can ever recover from that. Now, the charge is as worse as being convicted.
We were allowed inside the Karachi Central Prison, the first American television crew permitted to do so. We found not much has changed yet for poor women under Benazir Bhutto's administration. Thousands of women remain in prison, accused, not convicted, on the zina charge of adultery. Attorney Ansar Burney takes on zina cases no one else is willing to tackle. Women arrested on the slightest suspicion of sexual misbehavior, often accused by ex-husbands or vengeful neighbors.
And these are all zina cases,
all zina cases, those.
They are offered bail, but they don't have the money to make.
But they have no money.
How long might they stay in jail here?
For long, 5 years, 10 years, more than 10 years.
Without a trial?
Without a trial.
Along the way to prison, women face abuse at the hands of authorities. Before arriving here, this young woman says she was repeatedly raped by police.
Raped in the police lockup?
By several police officers.
They beat me and they raped me. And then they put chili peppers inside me to make me confess. When I think about it, I don't have the will to live.
It's just perverted, brutal torture.
Torture. How small she is.
Children are confined here too. Until they reach the age of 7, they remain in prison with their mothers. Many of these kids have never seen life outside the prison walls.
Your baby was born right here in the prison?
Yes.
There was one woman who had just given birth to a child, literally days before we arrived. She had been sentenced to 6 days. She had been there 9 months. How can such human rights abuses be tolerated?
It's going to be a long and arduous road. People aren't aware of their rights, and they're not equipped to face the world. No one individual can do it. I don't even think a government on its own can be everywhere.
You know, when we came into power, there were thousands and thousands of people who were rotting in jails, and they did not even know what was the charge against them. These are the things that we want to correct. These are the matters we want to correct.
But the zina ordinance has still not been overturned. Even under Benazir Bhutto's administration, Pakistan's most barbaric punishment has been handed down 8 times.
They called our names and said that we'd been sentenced to death by stoning. I was unconscious for 2 days. I couldn't believe it.
In most cases, women bear the brunt of the zina ordinance. In this case, the husband was also arrested. The wife was more comfortable in the presence of other women, so the interview was conducted by producer Janice Tomlin.
What did the police accuse you of? What did they say you did?
They accused us of not being married. They said we'd had illicit sex.
So you were arrested even though you had a marriage certificate, and they accused you of not being married.
The police did not accept our explanation because there was another person involved who wanted us ostracized.
Did you know this man?
I just knew that he lived in the village.
It's usually, you see, it's as a result of some kind of a family feud. Or it's to get back at you. It's very convenient. You say, well, I've seen so-and-so, going to bed with so-and-so. And that's it.
By retaining these laws, does it tarnish the good image of your country?
One cannot move so fast as to invite a backlash, but yet one must move with determination, and we will move to restore the dignity of individuals to Pakistani citizens.
We in the United States are always fond and looking for a timetable. We are perhaps more impatient than you and your people are.
You cannot be more impatient than us.
Does it give you a sense of hopelessness or a sense of determination?
I think a sense of anger and a feeling to fight back. I have to believe that eventually what we are fighting for will result in a better society. Because if one didn't believe it, one would stop fighting for it.
Tom, this is such a disturbing report to see women like this. Are there still people being stoned to death?
Barbara, the government of Pakistan has never carried out a stoning. We are told that in the outlying rural villages there have been stonings.
You know, other countries have discriminatory laws, but this does seem particularly harsh. What are the chances of their being repealed?
Really, Mrs. Bhutto is very popular with the people, and this is high on her agenda. She sees these laws as a twisted interpretation of the Islamic laws, and she says Pakistan is now a democracy, and she wants these laws straightened out.
But the laws were put down by the repressive government.
Right. They are not Islamic laws. They are laws under General Zia during martial law. That's a major difference, and we'd like to make it very clear.
And so one hopes that they can be repealed.
Right.
It's an amazing report.
Well, next, Dr. Timothy Johnson sorts out the sudden confusion and double talk about cholesterol. And later, Gunther Gebel-Williams, the greatest circus animal trainer in the world, a very different man than you might expect. Bob Brown with The Lord of the Rings.